So I'm very excited to welcome Dr. Karthik Ramani, an interventional nephrologist with interest in device development, outcomes research, and using big data and AI to improve patient outcomes and address healthcare disparities. And I promised him a short introduction so he can tell you much better than I can all the cool stuff he does. And then your reminders, what are you going to ask? Lots of questions, many clarifying questions. Like, do you all know what a nephrologist is? If not, somebody ought to ask what a nephrologist is. Second thing, what are you going to give us?
Flying monkeys.
Flying monkeys. Lots of flying monkeys. I have promised Karthik flying monkeys. He came over here saying, I can't wait for flying monkeys. Out of the box. Those of you on Zoom, feel free to be pinging Eve and Hannah with questions and comments. And I think we're ready to go. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, guys. I actually didn't come here for the flying monkeys. I came here for the donuts, and I also came here for the Doritos. So donuts and Doritos. But it's as exciting for me to be here as I'm sure it's exciting for you guys to be here as well. So it's going to be interactive. I want it to be fun, interactive, as well as provide opportunities to give me solutions. Before we get started, let's take a selfie. No, I got to post on my Insta. No, like, I don't even know what Insta is. But yeah, I mean, I want to start off by talking about something which I'm passionate about, and it all started off in business school, and there, we were undergrad students, grad students, doctors, physicians, everybody, and all of us came together and we took part in this business and tech jam. If you haven't seen it, it's on YouTube. We're famous now. But we came up with something called CORE. And CORE is to connect research. And my whole reason for being is to make an impact in people's lives. Impact in different ways. In different ways, meaning direct impact such as patient care, direct impact in terms of being with you all in education, direct impact in terms of research, but also indirect impact. How can we have an impact beyond just that one-on-one impact? And that's where my Twitter account comes in now. So coming to CORE is about connecting research. So if we can do a show of hands over here, yeah, and tell me, anybody here who knows even what a clinical trial is, can you just do a show of hands here? Okay, so clinical trial, approximately 30%, 40%, 50% perhaps. So the idea of CORE is to democratize clinical trials. And so for those who don't know what a clinical trial is, such as me, scientific research studies that help determine the safety and effectiveness of an intervention done on humans, can be preclinical when it's before, but it's primarily done on humans. And the last step before intervention is approved for use by the general public. That is a clinical trial. And so why do we do clinical research? So clinical research is because we want to discover new things, we want to further science, understand patterns in health, and make an impact. And so as on October 19, 2023, there are about 470,003 active studies which are happening all across the world. And this is according to clinicaltrials.gov. And when we talk about these active trials, that means we're making some intervention. We're doing something to change things around. And so again, to give a little background of the phase of a clinical trial, the primary phase of a clinical trial are preclinical, phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. So preclinical is all these lab-based studies. Phase 1 is safety, phase 2 is safety and dosing, phase 3 is safety and efficacy, and phase 4 is post-marketing safety and efficacy. So now you have a broad overview of what is a clinical trial, what are the phases of a clinical trial, and our primary premise was to democratize it. So why do we need to democratize clinical trials? And one of the reasons is because we felt that there wasn't enough diversity and inclusion, which is critical to the evolution of clinical research. So let's start with the first question. Why is diversity and inclusion critical to the evolution of clinical research? So what does diversity mean for you? So can I just start off from that side of the room? So what does diversity mean to you?
Differences in backgrounds being included, like origin, also
so where are you from, right? I mean, so you want to say, hey, you know what? Regardless of where you are in the world, we're all the same. What does diversity mean to you?
About the same thing, where you're from, what your beliefs are, how you grew up, what identities you hold.
Okay, so I'm going to throw this virtual mic over there. So you in Michigan shirt. What does diversity mean to you?
Socioeconomic class too.
Socioeconomic class. Do with the iPad writing down there, if you don't mind. So what does diversity mean to you? And do you think there's enough diversity? I mean, DEI is a buzzword. Everybody's doing a buzzword on DEI, right? Is there enough equity? Is there any diversity? In your life, do you feel that diversity is an issue? Do you feel that equity is an issue? And do you feel there should be more inclusivity? Tough question. Okay, think about it. So why do we participate in clinical trials? How many of you, let's do a show of hands, how many of you have participated in a clinical trial? We have, wow, 1, 2, 3, why?
I was like 8 and they wanted to figure out what was wrong with my brain.
You.
They asked me to.
Okay. How about you?
I was hoping people understand cystic fibrosis a little bit better.
Lovely. So when I first was asked to participate in a clinical trial, I was an undergrad. I said, listen, I'm poor. I need money. Clinical trial, easy money, give some blood, do whatever, and save the world. And so, yeah. So I was one of those 3% of the people that participate in a clinical trial to earn extra money. So most of the people participate in a clinical trial. When they did this survey, about 35% you can gain access to potential treatments before they're widely available. So rare diseases, chronic diseases, to help improve people's lives, 30%, 20% to improve their own condition as well, and then 12% is other. How did they reach out to you to ask you about clinical trial? Was it in a doctor's office?
I think it was like when they were trying to diagnose me,
Okay.
the doctor recommended this trial, but it was to my parents. Yeah, I was
Okay.
young.
How did they solicit you?
Social worker in the clinic.
Social worker in the clinic. How about you?
One of my doctors asked me to.
Okay, so 20% here, according to source of clinical research information, 20% come to a physician's office, 25% mail, 30% email, 35% media, 40% internet. You have to understand that is this DEI? So internet, media, email, mail, physician's office. Does that include everybody that we just talked about? Is that a good way to include people? So what is a good way to include people? You in the hat. Donuts are good. Is there a better way? Join my Twitter account, X.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like the ways that you reach out to people, and those seem to cover most of the typical people.
I'm visually impaired. I'm a diabetic. You know, I'm a baby boomer. I don't even know what is this? You know, you know. So is this a good way? Think about it. Okay, we'll get there. So diversity and inclusivity is important, and why is it important? And so therefore we need to understand the background of clinical trials in general again. So minorities make up 39% of the US population, but they only represent 25% of clinical study participants. So there is a definite gap and a barrier to people and minorities being represented adequately in clinical studies. The idea of a clinical study is to push the envelope of science, to come up with new treatments, new therapies. Now, Pfizer came up with a vaccine for COVID. Moderna came up with a vaccine for COVID. Did they include Native American, Hispanics, African Americans in their studies, and then they say kind of ramp it up? Does anybody know? The answer is no. So does what applies to Caucasian Americans, does it apply to everybody in terms of efficacy of the COVID vaccine? No. So diversity and inclusivity is important. There are significant disparities in clinical trial recruitment and enrollment. Out of every 100 Black clinical trial candidates, only 23 will ultimately enroll. And that is unfortunate. There was a lovely study called the Barber Shop Study. So high blood pressure is an issue. And me as a nephrologist or a P doctor, that knows a lot about high blood pressure and the impact that Doritos has on blood pressure. So now, to get people to take a blood pressure drug and to be a part of a clinical study, it's very difficult for them to trudge and come to the doctor's office and be a part of a clinical study. So where do you talk about your woes the most? Who do you talk to? Who do you confide in the most?
For what?
For life in general.
Dad.
Dad, you.
My Therapist.
You. Friends, you. Friends.
Therapist.
Therapists. Okay, so here in this row, in the middle section, a lot of therapists, a lot of friends. But for African Americans, when they did a survey, they said barbers. And so they did a study and said, hey, listen, when I sit in my barber's chair, well, I don't have much hair now, but when I sit in my barber's chair and get a little haircut and I talk about life and stuff like that, that's when I can ask them about high blood pressure. And they talk, and they talk, and they talk, and they participate. And they found that certain drugs work best in the African American population that did not work as well in the Caucasian population. And they stayed on for the study more than the 23 out of 100, more than 23%. 75% of them stayed on in the study because of their barber, not because of the study. So we need to find novel ways to engage beyond just the internet, beyond just the mail, beyond just the physician's office, beyond even my therapist, though he's cool. So it's very important to kind of include people in studies. What about women? Before 1993, most testing done in clinical trials were conducted on men. So there's only 1 out of every 10 people in a clinical study was a woman, and a Caucasian woman at that. So now we are getting more of a sense of why we need diversity and inclusivity in clinical studies. So if I'm taking, let's say, liquid death to be ready to do my midterms, and at the same time, it is only studied on men, but then I take it as a woman, then it could have an adverse effect on my heart because of the caffeine intake and cause me to have a heart attack. So we need to be more inclusive. So let's look at some of these vital stats, which I know most of you can't read, so I'll read out for you. 5 times as many women die of heart disease and breast cancer. However, 1 out of 10 of them only get enrolled in a heart study. 2/3 of clinical research on heart and stroke focuses on men. 70% of chronic pain sufferers are women, but 30% only get enrolled in a study. 80% of pain studies are conducted on male mice or human men. 2/3 of all people with Alzheimer's are women. So unfortunately, when we use clinical trials, which are out there currently as a foundation to make decisions to further our health and further science, can we use this as a template for all the people in this room? No. Can we use it for me? No. And that's why we need to promote diversity and inclusivity, and that's why we need CORE. So somebody mentioned about geography, right? We talk about diversity, inclusivity, we need more geographical representation. And here, again, according to clinicaltrials.gov, which is a large repository of information for clinical trials, you can see where, in what regions, which are green, have the least amount of representation for clinical studies, and the reds have the most representation for clinical studies. So there's a wide disparity. Obviously, if you're in North Dakota, it's totally different than if you're in California, or Texas, or in the Florida Panhandle, right? So we all differ based on phenotypes, based on genotypes, and hence clinical studies are important. So what are the primary barriers to participation in clinical trials? So let's ask that section over there. What do you think are common barriers? Why would you not want to participate in a clinical study?
I don't trust those doctors.
I don't trust them too. Over to you.
Because I have some like my own thinking about that, and maybe there are some misunderstanding or something like that, and will like mislead the topic.
How about you, sir?
Yeah, so how do you call that? Like where maybe you're afraid that you get something from this trial or something like that.
Yeah, put a Moderna in me, and God knows what will happen to me. How about you, Matt?
Physical inaccessibility to the medical resources. For example, if I live in a remote area and I have no doctors to like take care of me.
Yeah, so I'm getting a lot of disillusionment, doctors. I don't believe in something called science. How do you solve that problem? How do you promote diversity and inclusivity?
Provide more information about the
More information,
clinical
okay.
trials.
Yeah, so we dump information on them. So she will give you information, she will send you flyers, she will send you emails, she will send you Facebook links, she will send you LinkedIn links, she will send you all the links you need. Will you enroll in clinical study? Do you believe in science, sir? No. How about you? How do you address the barriers?
Accessibility, if you could like do like take home kits, like not have to go to a clinic every time.
Okay,
That's
take
my
home
go-to.
kits, okay, so go to them rather than them coming to you, so do more the barbershop model. Okay, so we cover most folks, okay. So the 5 critical barriers to minority participation is something which you three mentioned, which is mistrust. You know, I don't trust science, I don't trust people. Number 2 is a lack of comfort with the clinical trial process. Most of us don't even know what a clinical trial is. Then you're telling me that, hey, I got to participate in it. And now I got to go to do it. So where's my incentive to do it? So there's a whole lack of comfort with that. Lack of information. Where do I go to get the information? Have you guys, and all of you, let's do a show of hands. How many of you guys knew about clinicaltrials.gov before I kept mentioning it like almost 4 times now? 3, okay, 4. Awesome. So I didn't know what clinical trials are. No, I'm playing. So there's a whole lack of information of where to go to get those information. Time and resource constraints. I got a life, right? I got my Insta buddies to deal with. How do I go for my clinical trial? Not happening. And there's a lack of overall awareness. What applies to you may not apply to me, right? So we need to get that more personalized clinical trial management. So unfortunately, what we are facing now is an iceberg phenomenon, wherein you see a small population, so just like here represented, maybe 3 or 4 of you who are engaged, educated, empowered, savvy, and connected. And so you participate. There are some of those who participate because they have no other choice. We're sick, we're older, and we're unable to participate otherwise in research. So it's like, okay, you know what? This is my last effort, I'm going to do it. Then there are those who don't participate at all because they're racial and ethnic minorities, unless you go to them, unless you do an outreach. There are those who are medically underserved who don't get to do a clinical trial. Elderly, veteran, linguistically isolated, low health literacy, LGBTQIA, rural, geographically isolated, financially underserved, all of that. And then there's hidden populations, which we should, we should definitely make efforts to reach out to stigmatized members, trans community members, victims of domestic violence, homeless people. All of them, they just get lost in this iceberg. So it's very, very important to understand that diversity and inclusivity is important. So we went through certain pathways, right? So we defined what a clinical trial is. We said, what are the phases of a clinical trial? We know that now there's a problem of diversity and inclusivity. We identify what the barriers to that problem are. We're kind of seeing, getting a sense of which groups are affected. But before we talk about solutions, I want to just walk you down not only from a participant phase, that is not only from us who are going to be a part of the clinical study, what about from me as the sponsor or the Pfizer? How do I manage a clinical trial? And so this little workflow, which you see over here, is how normally a clinical trial management system is implemented. So the way it normally works is, if I am Pfizer, Moderna, whoever coming out with a new awesome drug called Dorito, then what I would do is I would say, listen, let me make a study design. How do I make a study design of 40 people in the room trying to see whether Dorito has the best crunch factor? Because no one can eat just one, just like Lay's. So we go down to the study design, we have collaborators, feasibility, regulatory, budgeting, contracting, we go through all of that. But core, what we wanted to do in core was focus on recruitment and retention. Because by promoting diversity and inclusivity, what do we find in DEI? Most of them don't stay in a clinical trial. 1 of 10 of them are represented. So can we recruit the appropriate population that represents people for a clinical study? And can we retain them because they will just fall off? And so our goal was just to focus on these 2 yellows, which is recruitment and retention during the implementation phase. There are other clinical trial management groups which focus on the whole other aspect, which is reporting, publishing, closeout, education, and training. So let's take a step back and talk about clinical trial awareness. 85% of clinical trials fail to retain enough patients. And that's why, we focus on retention. 90% of clinical trials, or 80% of clinical trials fail to finish on time. 50% of sites enroll 1 or no patients in their studies. And 40% of the total US pharmaceutical clinical trial budget goes towards recruitment. And 30% of patients drop out during a clinical trial. So all of these numbers definitely are not good. And so how do we work on those barriers that we talked about? We all look for quick wins. And the kind of quick wins we look at for improving enrollment in diverse population trials is by having representative staff, diversify sites, language appropriate, cultural literacy and cultural sensitivity, community engagement by going out to this population, diversifying investigators. And I'll let you read those other aspects later, but it involves being aware and doing what you can to be inclusive in general. So when we did the survey of individuals in terms of where would you like or where would you receive more information about clinical trials, just like most of you over here, most of you mentioned, and here too, 73% mentioned doctor's office. 52% mentioned medical center of practice. 47% mentioned clinical trials of Gulf, and 18% family, friends, word of mouth, and the like. So before I go into the solution of what we did to connected research, let's pause and let's talk about, now that we've identified clinical trials as a problem, diversity inclusivity as a problem for recruitment and retention, what are the kind of solutions you would come up with in the room to aid being more inclusive in clinical studies? And not only in clinical studies, but now let's start thinking outside the box. How would we do improve diversity and inclusivity in other fields, which we can adapt to here? So for example, I was asked when we were doing customer discovery, hey, the product you're doing is promoting diversity and inclusivity. Why not in fashion? You know, how many people ask you, hey, it's fall fashion right now or winter fashion, and it's winter fashion, is it appropriate for your culture? Nobody answers that. They say, hey, it is the season, so you wear it. If you don't wear it, you wait for it next year or next season. So similarly, start thinking about ideas, and I'm going to quiz you guys in terms of saying, hey, how do you promote diversity and inclusivity in your organization? And if you don't, then how you do it in your own area of focus or expertise or in your area of engagement. And let's see if we can use some of those solutions and whether we did as well in our journey, because I would love to hear from you potential solutions to the problem that I described. Okay, so let's start with you. Yes, sir. Please raise your hand. Yeah.
I thought there was someone behind me. What if we did every single clinical trial in Indianapolis?
Everything. So everything comes to one center, one place.
When fast food brands want to
Why
test out.
Indianapolis?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
When fast food brands want to like test out a new menu item, they always do it in Indianapolis because its demographics are almost exactly representative of the demographics of the US as a whole.
Okay, so all clinical trials, one idea, clinical trials.
Did you make that up?
No, in Indianapolis.
Fascinating. Fascinating.
Okay, so clinical trials in Indianapolis, one place happening. Well, how about if they had the NIH in Bethesda? And so they say everybody has to go through here. Or let's say we say, listen, if you want to get a McDonald's, everybody has to go through only one location in the country. Would it be feasible?
No, it's probably a bad idea, but the demographics would be representative.
Okay, so
And it's a flying monkey.
It's a flying monkey.
Points, check.
I'll take that.
Okay, how about you? How do you promote diversity and inclusivity? Forget about clinical trials. How do you promote diversity and inclusivity in your own area of focus, engagement, expertise, friends? Have you ever thought about diversity and inclusivity? Is it important?
It's important. I don't really know off the top of my head.
Got it. How about you? Are there any solutions where we can adapt to and adopt for improving clinical trial representation for diversity and inclusivity?
The only ideas that are coming to mind are ideas that were actually implemented in a clinical trial, like they go to places of worship.
Place of worship, okay.
Similar to the barber shop. And like community organizations that serve that specific subpopulation.
Okay. How about you?
I just have an idea that connecting to how the school works, because for all college and universities, they have pretty good diversities among the students. So I'm just feeling like, for each of the clinical trials, can we have like a So similarly to like the acceptance rate for each different races or whatever, can we have kind of similar portion of different diverse or different race people come to join the same clinical type? So we can have a more broad and more general results upon the clinical thing. Since I saw like when you have talked before, we have mostly the testing people to be the white people, so we can have like a more diverse with everybody being a portion of it.
So, yes, sir.
I think this is such a hard question because
Yeah.
on the path for diversity, you can actually shoot yourself in the foot. Because like you can't just have like, at least in my opinion, you can't have a study where you go out and you have select randomly people and then you also over select this currently underrepresented group. You've basically just introduced a new bias. So what I was thinking is like, what you could do is let's say, okay, just for simplicity, there's two races in the world, right? This is obviously not true, but like black and white. If there was like 30% black and 70% white, what I'm thinking you could do, and there's 2,000 people in the world, is you survey 1,000, you survey 1,000 black and 1,000 white, and from those 1,000, you randomly select 30% of the black group and 70% of the whatever the makeup is to make it a inclusive thing. But I think that's really the only way you can do it is how you set it up. You can't add new layers to it, or else you're just introducing new biases, which is just such a hard question. I don't really know.
So let me just take a bigger jump, and maybe you can answer that as well, is what tools would you think we should adopt? Do you think it's social-cultural tools, technology tools? What are the kind of tools that we should adopt, or political tools, economic tools? What are the tools that we should adopt to address the DEI situation?
Karthik, can I
Yeah.
ask one quick clarifying question to build off what Iman was saying?
Yeah.
This is just a lack of understanding, and maybe the answer is it depends. But do we want to be doing clinical trials, a clinical trial with a population that is diverse? Or do we want to be doing many clinical trials on distinct diverse groups, right? Like just from a science standpoint, do you say, oh, we're going to keep it really simple, we'll take everybody and then sort of say, this is how everybody comes out? Or do we say, this is how pregnant women are impacted by this drug versus Caucasian, Western European, heteronormative, like what is the norm in the science?
Okay, so I think it definitely comes down to dollar. So I think it comes down to the economics of whether all that clinical trial can we have multiple clinical trials to deal with different populations? Because what's the goal of Pfizer? Is to get the vaccine out there to get paid for it. Now, what's the goal of me? Is to make sure I have the appropriate vaccine to deal with the virus. But so we have divergent thoughts. And so Pfizer needs to do the bare minimum they can to get FDA, I'm writing really small, approval so that we can jump across the hoop. And the bare minimum is to identify what is called bioequivalence. And if it's a drug. So we just want to make sure that with 25 people in the room, it's like you said, not 2,000, but just 25, if we're able to say it's safe, if it's efficacious, if it works really well, not killing anybody among the 25, we're good. Everybody's good. Now we can use it for 2 billion, but and that's unfortunate truth of clinical trials in general. So it's a dollar which identifies the scope of the project and the ability to diversify into different groups, and that's why they got corners, unfortunately. But ideally, yes, we should do that.
So change incentive structure. That's how you.
Okay, so economic. So one tool is an economic tool. Why did the vaccine world, going back to vaccine as a way of identifying this as a case study, since 1950 till now, how many vaccines do you know have been developed? Between 1 and 10. Just throw out numbers.
7.
8. Close. And the reason is, so you got a polio vaccine, everybody gets a polio vaccine, everybody gets your MMR, everybody gets your, herpes, varicella zoster. So you got the same vaccines. And then fast forward to now when this COVID thing, you got 3, 4, 5 different types of vaccine which happen in a couple of years. Why? Economics. So the US government said, hey, Houston, we have a problem. More than Houston, Indianapolis, we have a problem. And so since we have a problem in Indianapolis, we got to pour money. And so so the former administration said, okay, we're going to give a whole lot of money. Pfizer, whether you're successful or not, we are putting money into it. And so that's why there was acceleration of vaccine development and didn't have to jump through all those little hoops to go through the little FDA. Normally, that wouldn't be needed to go through an iterative process. And that's why we all went jumping through hoops, was because of the economic tools. So one of the things which you told us, and one of the things we've understood, is economic drivers to provide solution to DEI. Well, economic drivers, you can say is, hey, is the answer to everything. You give me money in my pocket, I can get more Doritos. You get more money in my pocket, I can have more donuts. So money in my pocket is not the answer only for everything else to promote DEI. Is there anything else we can use? What has happened in the last 20 years that has kind of provided kind of equality to society in general? What's the thing that we use the most? Internet. Exactly. So technology tools, are there any other technology tools that you all are aware of which can promote DEI? What's the buzzword right now, which can take over the world? AI. Oh my goodness. So machine learning, AI, ChatGPT, no. So my point is, maybe there are some technology tools out there. Has anybody addressed diversity, inclusivity using technology, perhaps? What is the utility of AI? Let's take a step back. Is AI new? How old is AI? I'm sorry, ma'am, because you have an iPad and the green, beautiful neon colored iPad. It's like my color here. So what do you use AI for? How old is AI? 5 years old, 1 year old, 10 years old, 20, 30, 40?
It has been a thing since 90s, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. So actually, it's almost 30 years old. We just didn't have the computing power. So the computing power, obviously, for iPhone, right? I mean, not iPhone, for Droid users, but of any phone, smartphone right now, is definitely much more than the computing powers on the supercomputers in the 70s and 80s. And so AI is not something new. The idea is not something new, but the ability to use something like machine learning and AI to provide solutions to address these diverse groups, to be able to scale it. So where would I use AI? Where I need to do matchmaking. If I enter the doctor's office and if I'm able to find out, hey, Karthik, you, based on your height and your weight and your love for donuts, you are appropriate for a donut study. That'll be awesome. And if Pfizer, from Pfizer's perspective, hey, let's say you go into the doctor's office and uses machine learning and matchmaking, and it swipes right and says, hey, Karthik loves donuts. We are a Tinder match. Oh my goodness, we are a match made in heaven. So the use of machine learning and technology tools may be, again, another facet to address DEI. What about anything else? Societal, sociocultural. Anything we can do socioculturally? Yes, sir.
I was gonna say this kind of ties in several points, but if you develop models to quantify the weariness or basically paid more to communities who are more weary or have greater burdens or hurdles to get to a study. Like if it's a privileged person could get there and they're a $20 payment for a study would be enough for them versus someone who's less privileged would need $50, trying to figure out who those communities are and compensate them more based on their needs.
Perfect. So
Yield management.
Yeah.
One in other industries,
Yes.
the airlines, yield management, revenue management.
Yeah. So identify, incentivize, right? So we identify and incentivize. How do you identify? Technology, social cultural, maybe follow the money, political, Maybe make an act saying that everybody that enters the doctor's office, in addition for registering for the insurance, can also have to say, hey, listen, I'm going to be an organ donor. Hey, I'm also going to have a drink, but I can also enter studies about different ways, different kinds of alcohol will have an impact on my liver. You know, so I think that there are multiple ways to bell the cat. Have any of you done any studies at all? Any research? Forget about DEI. Any studies, any research? Okay. Yes, ma'am. Sorry. But what studies have you been involved in? Any study? What study? No, anything. Research, anything.
Diabetes in mice.
Diabetes in mice. How do you recruit the mice? Did you identify? Did you incentivize? You say, hey, listen, you gotta.
They're identical. They're genetically.
Okay. So are they male mice?
Yes.
Why not female?
Because of where we put our graft.
Understood.
These are things that we talk about, yeah.
Okay. So how about you? Anybody else or somebody else? Yes.
We did fibrosis in different mice, but we did use male and female mice.
Male and female mice. Okay. Anybody else? Any other studies? Okay. So yeah.
Oh, I was not really raising my hand because I'm a chemist and that's not really relevant.
No, but did you use in your male and female mice? Did you use any technology tools to help you study and do any research on the mice? Did you do anything at all?
We did confocal microscopy on their tissues, and then we were trying to quantify and to also do qualitative data to look at the difference in liver fibrosis development.
Okay. Okay. So again, what I'm trying to get at is that we can address DEI in different ways. We're all talking about healthcare over here. Beyond healthcare, are there any ways that DEI or diversity or anything that you do, like I talked about fashion, when I walk into the store to Macy's, they don't identify me as a hip, happening Caucasian male, unfortunately. But are there any other walks of life that you feel that DEI or in general is not represented, and they do a good job in representing things well?
Yeah, very out there field. My dad is a professional umpire.
Oh, love it.
And umpires are very white and are usually men. And so there's a huge push that's been happening the last decade, really, to get more women into umpiring, and more people of color into umpiring. And so there are a lot of mentor programs where women who already are umpires are going into high schools, junior colleges, and are saying, are you into this? It's really fun. And just creating that kind of social bond to pull more people in.
Lovely, lovely. Any other walks of life? Okay, yeah.
They hate the oil and gas industry because they work off big in remote fields. So not a lot of women go there. It's usually men just because it's not very safe. My sister works in the United Arab Emirates, and like one thing they did to encourage the women in her team to start going to the field more is to just have resources over there. So like they built like female only resources and like more internet or like technology over there just to make sure they're connected to their family and they can update them on their safety and their like well-being.
So can we learn something from both those diverse environments? So from the empires, I think the mentoring aspect, I think, is essential. From the oil and gas, maybe creating a safe environment is essential. Something which we can do in clinical trials as well. And so what did we do? Well, I'll jump a little ahead and say that, hey, what it really means is that we need to address some of the barriers in clinical research in general. And so what we identified is we wanted to leverage technology to solve the DEI space by adopting safe environments, by identifying, I'm sorry if I'm just circling things and you just see my scribble. I just realized that my handwriting is amazing. But anyway, so yeah, by identifying appropriate individuals, by mentoring them, by incentivizing them through compensation, and then trying to reduce bias. And so from a centralized system, well, we wanted to give power to the hands of the people. So here is not about power in the hands of the barbershop, power in the hands of the physician, power in the hands of Pfizer or Moderna, power in the hands of anybody else or the sponsor, the participant. We wanted to democratize clinical trials by giving power to the people. And so we decided to identify technology solutions which would do that. And so we identified that were difficult, sorry.
I just want to clarify, what do you mean by democratizing? What does that word mean in this context?
Great question. Can I ask them that question?
Yeah,
What,
yeah.
what does democratization mean? Does it mean giving everybody an equal vote?
It's another buzzword. I'm just like,
Yeah.
what is
Doesn't mean
democratizing?
giving everybody an equal vote? Doesn't mean saying that everybody has equal power? Doesn't mean that, unanimity wins, majority wins? Does it mean that, only 4 people have a choice, but 6 others say, no, you know what, we shouldn't do it, No. So the idea of when we use the word democratization in our solution, what we meant is to give power to the hands of the people so that they can have the power of choice. Rather than others, that is the sponsor or the physician's office, choose for them, they choose for themselves. And so that's what we mean by democratization in our context. So great question. So we identified there were certain barriers to technology. So a lot of our individuals that we came across were visually challenged. A lot of them are not tech savvy. A lot of them said, hey, you know what? Technology is another buzzword I don't want to do. I'm a buzzkill. So I don't want to deal with that. And so they said, hey, I can go to my barber, convenient, I talk. But you give me a phone, you give me a device, you send me a mail, you send me anything else, I will not. So what are the barriers to technology that you guys normally see? Ma'am, I see you at the end over there. Are there any barriers to technology adoption that you see in your life? And how did you solve that problem if you saw that?
For myself I can say for my parents,
yes,
there's a tremendous barrier to like cell phones and things that require you to log on and use the web to access them. So like when you had to say, go online to sign up for a vaccine, that was just something that was not going to happen.
Right.
And it couldn't be conveyed over the phone to explain how to do it. And so it was a major barrier of entry.
Excellent. So I do think that we need to have a diversified, multi-pronged approach beyond just technology to result in solutions just like was described. And so we wanted to come with a two-way system for a matchmaking for both the researchers as well as the participants. And that's what we meant by democratization, is that if I go to a doctor's office, if I have a certain phenotype, let's say, as I said, I love pizza. And if I love pizza, I get matched with Joe's Pizza. And if Joe's Pizza is doing a study, they match with me. So having that kind of matchmaking ability was ideal. But then we found when we were doing a customer discovery that for researchers, there was not enough money to do this. Why should we do this? They were not affiliated with any big, large institutions. And then they were not taking care of a lot of underrepresented groups. And for participants, there were access issues. And a lot of underrepresented groups, like was mentioned, do not like technology in general. And so the core solution was to create those tools to improve accessibility, DEI, and the recruitment and retention in clinical trials. And our tools was to make it easier for researchers to create studies and tools to make it easier for researchers and participants to connect. And so we came up with this project and we did a study. And so this was 2 years ago, we came up with this, a product called Core. And it was there on the App Store at that time. And now it's going through a different iteration of it. And then we took part in the Business and Tech Jam and we did pretty okay. But this is what it looks like. And I don't, one of my co-founders who is an undergrad over here is Ethan. So he developed some of these wireframes as you see over here. So we developed an app which allows you with AI or matchmaking algorithms to match the study participant to the research, just like I described, and vice versa for the researcher to connect with the study participant. We did a lot of these in-class events where we did actually do a Joe's Pizzeria kind of matchmaking algorithm with AI-based technology. And we were 75% successful in identifying the right pizza place and the right beer garden to go to for drinks on a Friday night. But I do think that there's a lot more that needs to happen in this space. And I would love some of your inputs, and that's what I was trying to kind of push the envelope a little. But some of the product highlights was obviously that we had a study builder, we had materials, we had a lot of features, highly customized, and obviously we had this matchmaking machine learning algorithm to match researchers with patients. And then the beauty was that it was created in a very private, secure, safe environment. It identified folks and was able to incentivize them. And then the participants were able to store their profile data as well, which was very important to them. And that's what created customizability, matchmaking, DI, and access. And that's what made Core unique in general. Yes.
Quick question. So in terms of accessing their data, would this have any access to their like medical records? And if it did, how do you protect that?
Excellent. So we developed obviously a proprietary container-based system, which obviously in concert, and we worked with the University of Michigan. So we developed a proprietary mechanism so that the EMR data is kind of within University of Michigan itself. So it doesn't go to the Pfizers and the Modernas, and it's not sold anywhere else. Great question. And so there's a lot of stuff which is out there. We did our customer survey, and we saw that Core did much better in all of those aspects rather than the other things which you saw, which is Ripple Science, RedCap, Qualtrics, Medidata, Easy Access, Medable. So we are looking to develop, refining our machine learning algorithms, doing more customer discovery. And right now we're just an Apple-based platform, but we're looking at other things as well. Let me see if there are any questions about machine learning, but I think I may have, let me see if my friend and co-founder, Amit, who's an AI specialist as well, is on for the Zoom call. And if not, do we have to use machine learning to match me? Has anybody used AI in general in different tools, in different places? Okay, what have you used it in?
Like giving me like advice, not writing essays, but like giving me like ways to start. And
so what platform do you use?
There's like this it's called Ask PDF. It's like an extension, a plugin through ChatGPT 4.
Okay. How about you?
Same thing.
Same thing. Okay, so in that space, so more in the application realm, rather than using it as in creating AI based on neural networking in general, not creating the ecosystem. Is that correct? Did you identify any barriers in doing that?
It's cost barrier. That thing is like $20 a month.
Yeah, ChatGPT 4, yes. Okay. Anybody else have you used AI in general? Anything? Okay. So I think AI in general has a lot of negatives as well. So AI depends on what you feed it. Just like in your ChatGPT, if you say write an essay about why the Earth is flat, it will find out ways, and it'll make sure that everybody knows why the Earth is flat, and it'll write 100 words. But it does not provide logic always to that statement, and that's where I think having use of AI or machine learning, the appropriate, having the right tool to make the right cut, as that is important, having the right AI machine learning resource to provide the right solution is also important. Any questions so far? Yes.
So presumably this is an app or a service that the user had to sign up for.
Yes.
Download something, create an account for something.
That's correct.
How did you get participants in that?
Excellent. So when we started small. So we started with student members in the classroom. So it was soliciting those who were within the class. Then it was soliciting those individuals who are participating within a particular chronic disease realm that we were focusing on. We were focusing on pediatric oncology, where we wanted to have a maximum impact. And hence, we reached out to the pediatric oncology space. And then we were able to solicit them and their parents because they had to sign waivers. And then, and that's how the app idea came to be. Does it promote diversity and equity and inclusivity by taking care of the baby boomer population, by answering all this? No, absolutely not. And that's why I'm here, is to look for those solutions beyond just core 1.0, but look at core 2.0 or 3.0 or 4.0, wherein we will be able to do more than just have an app with machine learning algorithm and use some cool buzzwords like democratization, but to have something more when we do truly get more representation from all parties. The reason we chose pediatric oncology space is obviously because, as I said, because of the impact factor, but also because of the fact that when we did our studies, only 20% of those individuals within pediatric oncology stayed true to the trial till the end of the trial. So most of them drop out. Most of the kids, unfortunately, can't undergo the pain of going through those chemotherapeutic agents and drugs. Most of the parents can't see the pain of their children going through that process as well. And so that's why we started off with that. But we're looking also at chronic neurological disease, so chronic diseases such as MS, which we feel will have a big impact as well.
One of the biggest reasons for patients and their families dropping out of trials is the physical pain. How does matching?
Excellent. The matching doesn't help with the pain piece at all. No, the matching just helps them identify that there's a study out there. Because most things will happen for pediatric oncology is participating in a study comes out of desperation. And we don't want it to come out of desperation. We want it to come out of choice. So we don't want to come at stage 4 cancer and say, hey, you know what? I don't have a choice. Tell me what studies are out there. We want to come at inception point, give enough time for drug development as well, and the economics to kind of catch up. There was one person who wanted 1 week more of life because of pancreatic cancer, and that drug cost $150,000 per injection. This was in 1995. Right now, that drug costs $150. It gave him one more week.
You mentioned this program is done by matchmaking. I was thinking about whether one patient can get matched to different research programs, because I know probably different research like trials that they will kind of interact with each other. Is that
absolutely. That is what we're planning to do, and that's what it does. It does not only match to one research program, but matches across the ecosystem. So what it does is it ties into the ecosystem of clinicaltrials.gov and says, hey, you know what? You match with this whole list of studies. And then you can filter and see which study is appropriate for you, which study is active, which is appropriate based on all our diversity information that we described as well, and also the appropriate phase of the study, because certain studies will not allow you to enroll if you're at a certain phase. Yes.
Can you say a little bit more about the metrics for a match? Like, what does moderate mean, and then how did you come to that on both sides?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So let's talk about the diabetic kidney disease space. So in the diabetic kidney disease space, a lot of you must have heard of the celebrity drug Wegovy or Ozempic, and say, hey, you know what? That's why I'm like this. It's because of Ozempic. I got the Ozempic face, and I can still have my donut. No, so what we did is actually those drugs were developed for diabetes and kidney disease. So the metrics that we used are certain lab-defined metrics and certain phenotypic metrics. So, like I know in hypertension and high blood pressure in African-American people that a certain class of hypertension drug works the best. Now, if I'm studying different new class of hypertension drug, and the sponsor identifies that only 10% has recruited African Americans, then it'll automatically flag that individual to match me. So some of the metrics that we use are lab-based, some are clinical metrics, some are phenotypic metrics, and then demographic metrics, socioeconomic metrics, gender metrics, and beyond.
We reach out to like health insurance companies as like, if you sign up for this app, you'll get a reduction off your premium, and then you can get their health background also.
Yeah, lovely. Haven't done it just because we are clean, green, just because we don't like insurance company, no, because we have not done it. We may plan to do it, just like, there's incentivization to do it. But I think I see a lot of folks, when I say folks, a lot of health-based activities happening, just like we do greenwashing, right? So most of the countries, when they want to get carbon credits, what do? I say, okay, I'm polluting. I'm going to drive my gas guzzlers, polluting the environment, but I'll plant two trees. So when I plant my 2 trees, it's okay to do whatever and pollute the environment because I'm doing greenwashing. Similarly, in health washing, what happens is that they'll say, hey, I'll give you a $5 gift card to enroll in a lifestyle fitness, go to your local gym to make sure you get healthy. That's what my insurance company does. But at the same time, I will make sure I'll disincentivize you to get free healthcare when it's needed. And how do I do that? I charge high premium. I make sure that, accessibility to your doctor is very, very difficult. You need to go to virtual portals before you can reach a doctor. By the time you have a dermatology appointment because of my acne, it will take me 6 months to see a dermatologist. So that was one of the principles behind not tying in with going into the dark side with the insurance company or hand in glove. But I do think that it may be a natural extension in the future. Yes.
So for me, this is one of those problems where I start off thinking that there's a problem and therefore there's a solution. And I think for me, it's helpful to think about a collection of problems and specifically, what are the reasons why, you talked about the reasons why someone would not do a clinical trial. What are the reasons somebody would do a clinical trial? And if somebody would do a clinical trial because they thought it would help themselves or their family, that is a population that the strategy is going to be very different than someone who does it because there's some form of financial incentive versus someone who does it because of benevolence or peer pressure. And so I'm just thinking about, as you go forward with versions 2 and 3, it might actually be 2A for group A and 2B. And I suspect that the distribution of reasons is going to vary by a lot of the demographic groups, not perfect alignment, but when you think about the choice that someone's going to make, that's going to drive the way that you're not just finding them, but it seems like there are 2 pieces. There's finding someone who's good for a trial and then actually seeing in an ethical way that they enroll in the trial.
Absolutely. No, I can't agree more. I think that, and that's why I wanted to have a little brainstorming session to see if there are other different strategies to adopt for different groups, for different populations, for different situations, because this one-size-fits-all thing does not work. So core 1.0 does not work. And that's why I'm here, is because it does not work. We want to promote DEI, right? We are coming from that area. And we want to we identify the problem, but we need, I think, individualized strategies. Yes.
In terms of dealing, part of that is sure, you can find all these different populations. You're this is your whatever, 2A, 2B, whatever. You would still be dealing with something like self-selection though, right? Because it's not like you can forcefully download this app onto every person's phone. This is not like YouTube, but this is not you can't force people to be a part of it. So there is still an element of self-selection, even if you are looking for all these subgroups of just well, we're gonna look at this population and this population, and this population. It's is there a way to combat? I don't know.
And I think I need your answer. I don't know the answer.
As you probably know, having learned from their U2 experience, Apple actually has not a clinical trial, but a health study app on every iPhone and now on, as of recently on every iPad. That there is, and people can choose to sign up. And so again, these are not clinical trials of treatments for specific diseases, but for example, they're running a massive data collection operation on studying heart health for example, there is a study of Parkinson's, both for people who have it and people who are at risk and people who don't have it. And basically the idea is you carry a phone in your pocket and it measures your gait and it measures how it changes over time, and that keeps helps keep track of you know, how your Parkinson's disease is progressing or not progressing, and if you kind of tie it into together with any medications you might be taking, that can actually be very helpful to your treating physician if you can access this data. But speaking of these kind of very broad scale things, you know, I asked in the beginning how many of us know what a clinical trial is, and a third of people raised their hands, and this is a healthcare engineering class. So I'm wondering whether there's been any kind of attempts to kind of popularize this idea very broadly, maybe through TV or print ad campaigns or something like this, because most people find out what these are when they're ill and sometimes critically ill. And that's not the best time and headspace to be taking in new information and making decisions and reading a lot and familiarizing yourself with something new. But if people just kind of walk around with the knowledge of what this is, that if and when it does affect them, or if and when an opportunity presents itself, they'll be kind of ready to make a decision that's informed based not on what they just learned, but what they've been aware of for a very long time.
Absolutely. I think, you know, awareness is a big issue. Awareness of clinical studies. And this, as you said, is a health engineering class. So you have a little more awareness, but for the average Joe, they don't even know what a clinical study is. You know, and I think that awareness should start again from a multi-pronged effect, not only when you're in the doctor's office, not only with media, not only with the, you know, with the governmental, enforcement to some degree, but also I do think that there has to be a more societal change. And this is where I think society and different societies have different ways of dealing with it. So obviously, so I was in Winnipeg, Canada, and Winnipeg, Canada, I went over there just because I love curling and because I wanted to see a polar bear fart. And so the polar bear did fart, and I do have a picture of it. But anyway, the point being that in Winnipeg, Canada has the highest rate of diabetes and kidney disease. And I did not know that. I did not know that. And they, in Winnipeg, Canada, have a provincial system which supports kidney disease, dialysis patients, transplantation, awareness, all of the above, which is at an 80% rate of awareness compared to Toronto. So Toronto is a big, booming, international, cosmopolitan city, and awareness for organ donation over there is 45%. So I do think that you need to have a multi-pronged effect. I think most people do not know what a clinical trial is, but it needs societal change, because when I'm bombarded with media on television or ads, those are drug ads, which are again follow the economics for adoption. And it says, hey, listen, Karthik, if I take this psoriasis drug, I will look so cool, I'll be a Kardashian. And so, but sometimes I do not look like Kardashian. I just keep up with that, so it's very difficult to always create awareness unless there's monetary benefit and backing to support that. And that's where the monetary incentivization should be there. And that's why the clinical trials need to understand that by recruiting and retaining more patients or individuals of a diverse group, it'll be universally beneficial. And that's why incentivization may need to come from the government, incentivization from private players, incentivization in all different aspects. And then society as a whole, we kind of elevate ourselves just like Winnipeg and the polar bears did. Yes.
We've got one over here.
Yes.
And then one over there, and
Yes.
then we start to wrap up.
Yes.
I'm wondering, let's say you're doing a clinical trial for a disease that disproportionately affects a certain population, maybe it's a certain ethnicity or a certain gender. In that case, would it be beneficial to have an algorithm that selects people and promotes DEI and provides equal representation across many different populations, or would it be more beneficial to focus in and include the majority of people from the population that is disproportionately affected?
So I don't have an answer to that because again, it depends on the disease itself. So each individual disease has a different genotypic and phenotypic manifestation. But I think that both strategies are appropriate depending on the appropriate circumstance.
Consider trust and building trust.
Tough one. You trust me? No, I've been here for almost 1 hour and 10 minutes. I've spoken about my love for the Kardashians and donuts. I've spoken about Doritos. I've spoken about, clinical trials and healthcare and barbershops. Do you trust me? Very tough. I do not know because there's so many intangibles in that question about how do we build trust. And so I do not have an answer for you.
It's fundamental to thinking about participation in clinical trials by diverse populations. If you don't build trust, I don't think that, you want a diverse population. Some people don't trust clinical trials for good reason.
Yeah, I mean, but
Thinking about how to address that is going to be fundamental for someone to download this and want to participate as a match.
No, I think that's a great point, but there are a lot of things that we don't trust, right? We don't trust the drugstore, but we still buy the drug. So do we?
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
so
have to acknowledge why the trust isn't there and really try to address that, right? Like, as opposed to saying, you don't trust this, but you'll do it anyway. That's not the same thing.
that's very true. So I think that's why one of the points you brought up is about incentivization to build that trust. So what are the confidence building measures that we can adopt to build trust? So one thing is making sure that the choice is with you, not self-selection, right? Making sure that, it's not the big bad brother or sister out there making decisions for you. Making sure that there's more awareness about the product and the science. Making sure that the drivers of desperation are reduced, but the drivers of trust are enabled. I think that all of those factors play. I do think that leveraging technology, which has been, again, I'm using democratization, has been able to kind of provide an even playing field. I think that is important. Why would I go to a barbershop? Because of that trust factor. Because I trust my barber, not the drug. So similarly, I think platforms, technology, maybe alternative solutions which build that trust, like you alluded to, would be essential. But I do think that, it needs a multi-layered response rather than just a one-on-one on-face kind of deal, because building trust takes time. And do we all have it? We have time.
Do you have one last one where you just?
Yeah, well.
We're gonna give you the last one.
Would it also help if you maybe could make sure that those who conduct the study also have a diverse background?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that that's one of the tools and one of the techniques for addressing those barriers is ensuring that the individuals who are having and handling the clinical studies come from diverse backgrounds. So they're aware and, they're self-aware, and then they kind of recruit the right people. But I think that what we were trying to do is why give it to the hands of the people? Sometimes it's difficult to find the right handlers, but it's easier again to use technology as a tool to kind of provide that even playing field. Yeah.
We'll squeeze in one
Yes.
more. Go for it.
About the right handlers. I know immigrants make a lot of the diverse population here. So in Dearborn, I know there are a lot of community centers, which is essentially people working there with computers who for new immigrants to come in, just to share resources, sign them up for insurance or sign them up for job sites and stuff like that. So for them, they trust that community center to give them all the information for the new country they're in. So maybe they could be some sort of handlers because people trust them and go to them asking for information.
Absolutely. So I think going back to the trust component and building the confidence, I do think that we need to leverage community partners. I think that's very, very, very important.
You want to squeeze one more in? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, we're focusing mainly on, in line with building trust too, but we're focused mainly on giving the patient control and the choice to participate in research. But what about also giving them the control to once they're, because you're saying retention rates are really low.
Yes.
So wouldn't, and I know with clinical trials, it's very you have to stick to fidelity, intervention fidelity, and all these metrics that you have to abide by. But giving the patient control, whether it's control over their data, who has access to it, and what they can and cannot participate in, as maybe that will increase retention. That way they'll stick around more and it will help maybe build trust.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that that's why, when the idea of all these Apple wearables and, tracking of all our information, as EKG tools, as all of that came to be, where's that data going? Are they going to sell it to my insurance company and then say, hey, you know what, Karthik's BMI is 35. Maybe we should hike up his rates, So Google went to one of my friends who has the largest eye hospital chain in Asia and said, we will analyze your eye retina history of all about 1.2 billion people for free. And all we'll do is we'll keep those records. That's all we'll do. And so thank God they said hell to the no. But but the point being that, analyzing that data, having those retinal scans, having all of that data, who owns it? What will happen? What are the impacts? We don't know all that. So coming back to you in terms of retention, in terms of confidence building, in terms of making sure that we do the right thing so that they be retained, I do agree with you that, we have to focus on that piece as well. I think incentivization also ties into that a bit. So if we incentivize people, say, hey, you know what? You get a $50 gift card if you do this study and you can keep those, those metrics of coming in week 4, week 8, week 12, and control your data. That data is yours. It doesn't go anywhere. That's the University of Michigan enterprise portal. That data is yours. It's not going to go to Pfizer. It's not going to go to an insurance company. It's yours. I think that will build trust.
So no one has given us a true,
Help
really
me.
flying monkey. So I'm going to end us to your point with the flying monkey about immigration. As an immigrant, you participate in, and of course, establishing that these are ethical clinical trials. But if you're, as an immigrant, participate in a clinical trial, will bump you up on the visa list. That is lying in a big way. And let's think about why incentives, right? So when you first say it, they're sort of like, that's a great, wait a minute, maybe not.
Do it with military service.
Right? So let's think really carefully about that line between incentive and coercion.
I like that.
Thank you, Carl.
Thank you.